What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Endgame. We're going to talk Dynasty today. I'm going to help you identify some of the top buy low targets in Dynasty leagues. Now, before we get going, let me remind you, we're doing a giveaway, free Patrick Mahomes signed plaque, and it's going to be to one of our subscribers, and we're going to give it away live on Endgame Live Sunday morning. Guys, we do every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Central. That is 11 Eastern, and of course, it's much earlier in the West Coast, wherever Chris lives. I don't know where that is. But you need to go and hit the subscribe button if you want in on the Mahomes giveaway. All right, we're going to be doing this. We answer start sit questions every Sunday, so definitely look out for that. All right, let's get into it. So speaking of Juju, number one, maybe the most obvious guy that you want to target. Is he a buy low, really? Yes, he is. Because if you think about it, you're sitting at the bottom of the standings. You're talking about one of these teams that maybe is higher up, wants to win now. Juju is not doing them any favors. And you know what? Probably sick and tired of it. If you have a veteran receiver that you were able to trade, maybe equal value, maybe even you would consider higher value in terms of what they brought to the table this year, it's time to pull the trigger. So I'm talking about a guy like maybe Julio Jones, who, I mean, coming off last week, all of a sudden his value is back up again to where it should have been, right? I mean, we know the ankle bothered him for a couple of weeks. It wasn't anything to worry about. All right, but Julio is a bona fide top 5 receiver, right? Nothing wrong with him. Juju could and should be at least a top 10 receiver, but you know what? In Dynasty, we have to think long term. Julio's 30 years old. Juju's still, what, 23? Okay. Now, here's the other thing. Interesting to note with Juju, he is a free agent in real life. Heading into next season, there's a lot of talk that maybe he's going to get dealt for real at the trade deadline, which is coming up. We don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know where he would land, but you know what? It actually might not be a bad thing because as it stands right now in Pittsburgh, he's part of a committee basically at receiver. We know Chase Claypool has come on. Washington is getting more targets than you would think. And of course, Deontay Johnson, when he's actually healthy, he's getting the most targets of the team. So as it stands, season totals, yeah, Juju's still the target leader there, but guess what? Barely, just barely. He has 30 on the season, and then right behind him, you got Washington and Claypool, just 2 less, and then right behind him is Johnson, even with just a couple games that he's played. He's missed a couple games. He's still right up there. And then you got Ebron right below them, right? Between 24 and 30, all of these guys are lumped together. It's going to be spread out. It's going to continue to be that way. Juju is not a target hog anymore, okay? He doesn't need to be. So if this is the fact, then you know that it's possible his value is suppressed. Now, of course, it depends on what the owner in your league thinks of him, but Juju's definitely a guy you should go out and grab. Don't hesitate to flip another top receiver. I mentioned Julio. That might be a little too rich for your blood. If you have a guy like Adam Thielen, who's also getting older, but delivering constantly, right, week after week, this would be the time, right, to look ahead and look at what Juju could deliver next year, going years ahead. Juju's going to be that guy who gives you production when Thielen maybe isn't anymore. All right, so that's obviously somebody you should be targeting. You should have hopefully targeted Claypool a couple of weeks ago before he blew up. I was lucky to grab him in one of my Dynasty leagues, literally the week before his 4-touchdown performance. No clairvoyance there. It was just good luck, I guess. But Juju is a guy definitely to target. All right, moving on to running back. Let me also identify a guy that you have not thought about, I guarantee, in months because he hasn't played, and that's Rashaad Penny. Now, he will not help you this year, even if he comes back, which he may come back toward the end of the season. He's not going to get that much, as far as run, and then he's not going to do much. He won't be startable. This is assuming he is completely healed from ACL surgery. Now, he could help you next year. We know what he's done in the past. Had a very nice 5.3 yards per carry average. He was looking really good right before last year's unfortunate injury. So will he be that same explosive guy? We don't know, right? That's the thing. It's tough to say coming off, something like that. Everybody responds differently, right? Some guys are Adrian Peterson and they play for, 20 years and they look just fine, even in 2020. But it doesn't mean that Penny will necessarily be that same level of guy. But it's worth a gamble because you know what? Right now, he won't cost you much, okay? You throw out a 3rd-round pick, maybe some sort of a bench running back that somebody who's desperate for running back needs, maybe a guy who still has got a little bit of juice, as far as giving some, value to a team, somebody who was a hot rookie that maybe isn't so much, You got a Joshua Kelly type. I wouldn't give up on him just yet, but somebody along those lines, right? Somebody isn't really going to be RB2 value. So you throw out an offer, you get Penny for very little in exchange, and then maybe you're looking at a guy who could deliver RB2, at the very least, probably RB3 value next year. Let me also talk about free agency. Chris Carson is set to be a free agent. There's no guarantee he stays in Seattle. I know he's a Pete Carroll guy, right? They love him there. He loves being there. It's a business, all right? And you know what? Seattle has been burned twice. Sean Alexander, they gave up the farm for him, and you saw it lasted 2 years later. He was basically out of the league. Marshawn Lynch, same thing, right? Rewarded him with a contract. How much longer before he was retired and then unretired and then retired? It didn't work out. You know what? Seattle might have learned the running back market is not what it used to be. These guys aren't going to get massive contracts. So if Carson decides he wants to get paid over staying in Seattle, it might be that Penny gets the starting job next year. So this is definitely a buy low offer worth making. All right, moving on. Let's actually throw a tight end in here into the mix because I got several guys I want to mention, but I have to talk about David Njoku because you know what? In the news, for obvious reasons, he wants to be traded, and this is the second time now he's requested a trade. We don't know if that's going to happen. It looks likely. I mean, there's no reason for them not to move him. They drafted Harrison Bryant, who's looking really good, actually, as far as rookie goes, and then Hooper's the man there now, which is why Njoku said, okay, writing's on the wall here. There's no love for me here. There's no reason for me to stick around. Number one, this tells me he wants to be a focal point of a passing attack, right? Number two, we've seen that he can be. He was actually being really productive before, again, unfortunate injury last year, right? It hasn't been quite right this year. Now they're just not using him. So if he goes to the right situation, he could definitely be someone who is fantasy relevant. All right. So what is the right situation? Well, we always link them to the Patriots, right? If he goes to the Patriots, who don't have anybody other than rookies at tight end, and then Ryan Izzo, who's really a special teams player, that could be something that really works for him with Cam Newton there at quarterback. That would be a dream. You want to grab him on your team in Dynasty before that happens, right? Because then his value will skyrocket. Right now, his value is really low because there's so much uncertainty, and he really hasn't done anything this year. So this is the time to make that offer. Probably the guy who has Njoku could care less, right? He's not holding on to him, hoping that he's going to break out. He's got another tight end on his team by now, all right? So make an offer and see what happens. I also kind of feel like with Irv Smith Jr., that window is closing, right? A couple of weeks ago, I actually grabbed him in a different Dynasty league because he had done nothing, literally nothing. And after first 4 weeks, his value was at basically rock bottom. They weren't even using him in the offense. Well, you know what? Now they are. Back-to-back games with 4 catches, 64 yards, 55 yards. Nothing amazing, right? He's not scoring too many touchdowns. In fact, he's not scoring any touchdowns yet, but it'll come. They finally decided to use him. We know he's a talented receiver. We know that's why he's on the roster. That's it. That's the reason. It's to be a pass catcher. He's not a very good blocker. He is a good receiver. So if you find yourself with a need for a solid tight end too, this is the time to throw out an offer. The Vikings are on bye, so luckily people will kind of forget about him this week and probably not valuing him too high. This one is a little more, a little more sus, I guess you could say, as far as what you might get in exchange for him, but it's worth a shot, right? You probably won't have to give up too much for a guy who's basically a tight end too. All right, back to more exciting things like running backs. A.J. Dillon. Now, I know whoever drafted him is probably big on him, but again, this is all about circumstance and situation. If your Dillon owner already has, Aaron Jones on their team and they kind of like to handcuff him, you probably won't give him up. If they overdrafted him, right, drafted him probably high, I don't think he was a first-round rookie pick anywhere, but maybe a second-round pick, right? If you could tell they really liked him, they're not going to give him up. But if you have an owner who took Dillon, maybe he went later than he was supposed to in certain drafts, and then this is a guy who's stacked at running back and he's a contender, he might be willing to give him up for nothing more than maybe a second and third round pick for next year. Okay. So I think that you can see that Dillon's current value is not very much. His future value could be great. Don't forget the fact that Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are both going to be free agents. Does that mean they're both going to be out of Green Bay? No. But do you really think both are going to stay when they drafted A.J. Dillon for that reason? I think it's very possible that Dillon, at the very least, splits time and has an RB2 role in Green Bay, if not RB1, right? If Aaron Jones decides He wants to get paid. He wants to go somewhere else. Maybe Green Bay wants to move on. They don't want to give up the farm for, a running back, which is what a lot of teams are doing. So Dillon could definitely have a role next year. It's going to be far more valuable than this year. So this is a guy that I think is definitely worth chasing in Dynasty. So go out and make an offer for him. All right, a couple of receivers. Let's finish with a couple of these guys that lesser names. You probably remember them from your rookie draft, but you haven't thought of them since. So Quintez Cephus in Detroit. He got a little buzz before the year started because, right before week 1, he was a starter all of a sudden. He was a starter because Kenny Golladay was not playing, right? Golladay was out, so therefore Cephus was getting the targets. He did get targeted. He got targeted 10 times. Unfortunately, he only caught 3 of them, so not a lot of production, but he did something. And then the next week, caught 3 passes again, and then ever since Golladay came back, he basically disappeared. That's good, right? For your sake, it's good. If you're looking for a receiver who could boom next year, this is somebody on the radar. It's somebody who could definitely see a high target share. Marvin Jones, okay, well, first of all, let me give this recurring theme. You've seen Golladay, Jones, and Amendola. All the Detroit receivers are set to be free agents next year. Now, they're probably going to pay Golladay. My money would be on that. I don't think they're going to keep Marvin Jones because if you look at how Marvin Jones is underperforming this year, his catch rate is 10 points lower than it was last year. He's done basically nothing to help when Golladay was out. And he just doesn't look quite the same for whatever reason. He's now 30 years old. So chances are they let him go. They keep Cephus and he kind of enters that role. Maybe they'll grab another receiver somewhere in the free agency or the draft, maybe a higher pick, who knows. But he could see a lot more targets than you would expect going to next year. He will cost you nothing. So I'd say go out and make a cheap offer for him. Same thing with Collin Johnson in Jacksonville. Same thing. Those receivers, we know Chark's the number 1 and we know Chanel is the number 2. Right. And that's going to be the same next year. All those other guys are expendable. Cole might not be there next year. Westbrook already is basically not there. He's there, but not there. Right. He's healthy scratch these days. So he's out. Chris Conley won't be kept. So we could see at least Collin Johnson with a wide receiver 3 role. And he's a 6'6" guy who is being used already a little bit in the red zone. He's got, I think, 4 red zone targets. That's good for something. I know better maybe in a standard league than a PPR league. He's not going to get targeted a ton, but they're starting to use him a little bit. And you know what? This is a team that, who knows, might have a new quarterback next year, but they're passing the ball more than we even expected. And I think that Johnson does have some value. A little more low end here. Again, the 3rd receiver, possibly that's the best case scenario on his team, but injuries happen. And you know what? These days, how many teams have 3 receivers that can deliver fantasy value? So I kind of like Collin Johnson as more of a low-end, sneaky play there, filling out more your wide receiver depth. But again, he will cost you almost nothing, and people are not thinking about him. And then the last guy I want to talk about, unfortunately, we do have to put a jet in here. So Sam Darnold, possible he gets traded before the deadline too. Who knows? We'll talk about that in our trade deadline episode. But with Darnold, I mean, you think about it, he's been sunk from the beginning. 0 opportunity to show what he can do because the offensive line has been terrible. The wide receivers that he's had to throw to have been absent, right? Not just terrible, but just he literally didn't have anybody to throw to this year. And then he was hurt this year. He had mono last year. I mean, he can't get a break, and he really hasn't had a chance. It's not that he's been terrible. This isn't like a Mitch Trubisky kind of thing where, he's had all these chances and they really are trying to make him succeed and it's just not working. This has been a whole slew of just bad luck and injuries and just being on a team with Adam Gase. If Darnold goes to a good situation, and I'm thinking personally, Indy would be the ideal situation because he doesn't have to play this year, right? He can learn under Phillip Rivers, and then next year gets to take over for Phillip Rivers, who is pretty close to being done. All right. Got a good offensive line, got a good running back in place, got some good young receivers there, and they probably will add another one at some point. So this could be the ideal situation for Darnold to be good, if not great. I'm not saying he'll be great like start him in a single QB league, great, but if you're in a super flex or 2 quarterback league, or if you just want a solid backup with upside, you know what? You could do worse than Darnold. And these days, getting a solid quarterback who could at least be a good backup, that's worth something. You could probably get Darnold for absolutely nothing right now. This is the time to chase him because he still hasn't played, right? He's still out, I believe, going into week 7. So, the value cannot be possibly lower. Go out and chase him and see what happens. All right, who are some other Dynasty buy low targets that you have in mind? Let me know right here on this channel. Give me a comment with a question on the YouTube channel, or you can follow us at Endgame Fantasy on Twitter, and then you can leave your questions there. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and catch us on Endgame Live Sunday morning, 2 hours before kickoff. We'll answer all your questions. Don't forget about that giveaway. Again, only to subscribers. So hit that subscribe button, follow us, and then we'll give you a shot. All right. Thanks for watching.